Depeche Mode is so much more than just a band. They're a 4-decade story of survival, of constant reinvention, and some pretty serious technological innovation. We're talking about a journey that starts in a post-war town and ends in global stadiums. It's the story of how a group of outsiders managed to create a sound that would define an entire generation of other outsiders.
And Charlize Theron she absolutely nailed it when she inducted them into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Her words really get to the heart of it. 'Cause you see, they did more than just make hit records. They wrote anthems for anyone, and I mean anyone, who ever felt like they didn't quite belong. Their music wasn't just something you heard, it was something you felt, deep down, creating this incredible connection for millions.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How did 4 working-class kids from a town that wasn't exactly a cultural hotspot become these global stadium gods with just synthesizers? It's a pretty wild story, and it doesn't start with some grand artistic vision. Nope, it starts with pure, simple, working-class pragmatism. Okay, so let's set the scene. Their story begins in Basildon, Essex. This was what they called a new town, basically built to handle London's population overflow after the war. It was kind of a blank slate, you know? And for these kids, a blank slate meant one thing: a chance to experiment and create something totally new. And here's the thing about their signature electronic sound. It wasn't some big artistic statement at first, not at all. It was all about practicality. Think about it. They were just kids. They didn't have a van to haul around heavy drums and guitar amps. But a synth, you could tuck that under your arm, hop on the train, and plug it straight into the PA system at a gig. That simple problem, no van, is what kicked off their entire electronic journey. Kind of crazy, right? So they get their first taste of success, and then boom, crisis number 1 hits almost immediately. After their debut album takes off, the main songwriter, Vince Clarke, just up and leaves. The music press was basically writing their obituary. But here's the twist. It turned out to be the single most important thing that ever happened to them. Why? Because it pushed a very shy Martin Gore into the songwriter's seat, and he brought this whole new vibe, darker, more complex, more introspective. That was the real beginning of the Depeche Mode we know today. So now you've got Martin Gore's deep, dark lyrics. The band needed someone to build a whole sonic world around those words, a true architect for their sound. And this next phase, this is where they went from being pop stars to becoming, well, genuine sound designers. And that architect was Alan Wilder. He was a classically trained musician, and he brought a secret weapon: the game-changing world of sampling. This was huge. They literally started going out with tape recorders and capturing the sounds of industrial London. We're talking the clang of scrap metal, the grind of machinery, raw, gritty, real-world noise. And then they take that noise back to the studio and turn it into these amazing percussive beats and melodic hooks. This was it. This was the birth of industrial pop. And where they recorded was just as important as how. They were in the legendary Hansa Studios in West Berlin, and I mean literally a stone's throw from the Berlin Wall. You could see it from the studio window, and you can just hear that environment in the music, that Cold War paranoia, that bleak, brooding atmosphere. It all seeps into the tracks. It was the absolute perfect backdrop for Gore's lyrics about power, faith, and desire. So while all this sonic innovation is happening, they're also going through a massive visual revolution. It all came down to one guy, photographer Anton Corbijn. And the funny thing is, he originally dismissed them, thought they were just too poppy. But once he was on board, he became their creative director for everything. He gave their dark electronic sound a visual language. You know the look: grainy, high contrast, moody, and just deeply artistic. He's the one who turned them from synth-pop boys into timeless, iconic figures. All right, so now they've got it all, right? A totally revolutionary sound and this powerful, iconic visual identity to match. Depeche Mode was finally ready to take on the entire world. And man, did they ever. They were about to prove that a band with just synthesizers could be every bit as massive as the biggest guitar rock acts on the planet. Just think about this number for a second. 60,000 people. That's how many fans crammed into the Pasadena Rose Bowl back in 1988 to see them play. This wasn't just another big concert, no way. This was a landmark moment. This was the definitive proof that electronic music wasn't just for clubs. It belonged on the biggest stages in the world. And then came Violator. Oh, man, what an album. You've got Personal Jesus, you've got Enjoy the Silence. I mean, these are legendary tracks. It was this perfect masterpiece of sleek, dark, even guitar-infused electronic rock. This is the album that just blew the doors wide open for them in America. It's what took them from being a massive cult band to being undeniable, genuine, global superstars. But all of that incredible success, it came with a heavy price tag. The pressure, the nonstop touring, the excesses of rock stardom. All of it started to just tear the band apart from the inside. Their absolute greatest triumph was about to lead them straight into their darkest hour. So we hit the early 90s and things just descend into total chaos. They launched the Devotional Tour, and man, was that name fitting. It wasn't really a concert tour. It was more like a rolling catastrophe fueled by addiction and pure, unfiltered exhaustion. It was just absolute mayhem. Dave Gahan's heroin addiction got so bad that he literally had a heart attack on stage. Andy Fletcher had a full-on nervous breakdown and had to leave the tour entirely. And the relationships inside the band completely fractured. They were teetering right on the edge of total self-destruction. And then came the final nail in the coffin, or so it seemed. In 1995, their sonic architect, Alan Wilder, quit. And his public statement was just damning. He talked about how the workload was totally unbalanced, how the relationships had completely deteriorated, and he ended with the line, "The end no longer justifies the means." For most people, that was it. It really felt like the band was well and truly over. But here's the thing about Depeche Mode. They've always had this one thing that could pull them back from the brink, an unbelievably devoted global fan base. And you might be surprised to hear where that devotion was maybe the most powerful, and that's behind the Iron Curtain. Yeah, seriously. In the old Eastern Bloc, where their music was officially banned, they became these huge symbols of Western freedom. Kids would trade bootleg cassette tapes like they were gold. The East German secret police, the Stasi, actually monitored their fan clubs because they thought they were subversive groups. And get this, to this day, fans in Russia celebrate Dave Day on Dave Gahan's birthday. Over there, they weren't just a band, they were an idea. And that connection with people on the margins is also what made them absolute icons of the goth subculture. I mean, you listen to an album like Black Celebration, with all its dark, brooding tones and its themes of sin and salvation. It was pretty much the perfect soundtrack for anyone who felt alienated from the bright, shiny mainstream. And really, that theme of resilience is what has defined their entire modern era. I mean, after somehow surviving the 90s, they still had to face reinvention and then, ultimately, a truly profound loss. And this part of the story is it's an almost unbelievable twist of fate. So the band decides to title their next album Memento Mori. It's a Latin phrase that means, remember you will die. They chose this title before founding member Andy Fletcher passed away so suddenly in 2022. Can you imagine? The title just took on this incredibly tragic, poignant new meaning. The entire project was transformed into a tribute. So let's just recap that journey. After Alan Wilder left, they found a way to stabilize as a trio for decades. They finally got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was long overdue. And then, after Fletcher's tragic death, they made the incredibly courageous decision to carry on as a duo. It just proved, once and for all, that their spirit was pretty much unbreakable. And look, the numbers really do speak for themselves. We're talking over 100 million records sold, 54 hit songs on the UK charts, and a lineup that started with 4 guys and is now down to 2. This isn't just about success. It's a testament to their incredible staying power and just how enduring their music is. Which really just leaves us with this one final question, doesn't it? Depeche Mode's whole story is about turning darkness into light. They took industrial noise from the streets, they wrestled with their own personal demons, they faced profound loss. And yet somehow, through all of that, they managed to synthesize a sound that, for millions of people all over the world, feels exactly like hope.